Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime. I'm your host, as always, Professor Prime. And today we're going to talk about Math and the One. And just to be clear, we're talking about the 2001 sci fi martial arts film starring Jet Li, where the basic premise is Jet Li is the only one who can stop Jet Li. But more seriously, we are going to get into the basic premise of the movie, as well as how math is used in the universe or universes of the movie, as well as storytelling, and also just math in the more meta sense outside of that storytelling, or rather, in addition to it, right? Depending on how you want to say it. Either way, we're going to talk about the one. And I'm going to talk about all those things that I just said, as well as my personal feelings on the movie. And along the way, as we discuss things, I absolutely want to mention the final fight because I feel like math was used in the storytelling in a way that's like subtle and direct, and that also works with some things that we're going to talk about when I get to it. But that in mind, assume that there are spoilers along the way, right? Given that. Now, personally speaking, I don't think the one is the kind of movie that spoilers are going to ruin that flick for you. I really don't. It's a fun film, and I just think you can enjoy it either way. But if you want to be really safe, I get it. So just keep in mind that there are spoilers ahead. That being said, let's get into it. So with the one, like I said, it's a 2001 sci-fi martial arts film starring Jet Li. Now, the big thing, I mean, I joked about like it pretty much being, hey, the only one who can stop Jet Li is Jet Li, but that's kind of true. But if we want to dive into the premise a little further, the idea is there was once an agent of the Multiverse Authority, the MVA, um, and that agent was forced to defend himself and got more powerful along the way because as it would turn out across the multiverses, if you defeat that version of you, um, then power is divided up amongst the remaining members. And till we get to the like beginning of the movie where some things go down and we're just left with two. We're left with Yu Law, the guy who's been killing all the other variants, and Gabe Law, the one remaining one left. And so to give you a better idea of things, at some point there was 125 versions of Jet Li's characters in this film. Yu Law systematically killed 123, and he had the one left. So the way it worked is there's some level of power which they don't fully get into, but that power was divided amongst the 125 variants, right? And then as you law systematically killed them out, that power kept on dividing amongst the remaining ones. So by the time you get to just you law and Gabe law being the only ones left, you have that power that's unspecified divided amongst two people rather than 125. So they're all getting like progressively powerful till they get to that point. And the idea is once you get to the one, no one knows what happens. It's like, will the multiverse collapse? Will nothing happen? Will the one who's left become some sort of god? Uh, and no one's on agreement because this sort of thing has never happened before. And so, yeah, that's the large premise of the movie. And throughout the movie, we see Yu Law trying to hunt down Gabe Law and leaving destruction in his wake. So, how's math to use along the way? Well, we just talked about that a bit, right? So, for starters, it's called the one. Math is just kind of built into it, right? But it's built into also how the power is divided amongst the different variants across the multiverse. It's also built into the technology and just everyday physics of whatever universe you're in, much like our own. But if you want to get into more specifics, right, it's also built into how they're traveling from universe to universe, right? They have a system, and in that system, they have different coordinates for different universes, and you can travel through that system in a limited window and get this through a black hole. I got to talk about that for a second. So the idea is that the multiverses are created when a black hole is created, and there's a limited amount of time um, to get to one universe through the other. when that black hole occurs. From what I remember from that, because I rewatched it recently, but I don't remember that part too well. I just remember that it happened. It's like, is that right? And so yeah, I feel like that was what was happening, and I'm just like, oh my god. But it's a fictional universe, so we're gonna roll with it, or a fictional multiverse, so we're gonna roll with it. And I wish they hadn't explained it exactly. But point is, they still use math to define how some things work within that world. Whether we're talking about coordinates or like time windows and just keeping track of time and locations in general, right? And again, there's math and the physics that we see in the movie, and I think that's used in some cool ways. When they use like, because you see some stuff like earlier on with Law and some stuff later on with Gabe, and the idea is like, they'll find different ways to show you how strong these characters are or how fast they are. Sometimes, it's some visual effect to show like speed, for instance. But it could just as easily be showing that like a character like Law can outrun a car, for instance. And to me, I think like, well, both work. I actually did like the car part more than like, just some sort of editing trick or visual indicator specifically aimed to show you that, hey, they're moving faster. Um, because you know how cars move, you get a picture of how fast those cars would have to be going, and you see this dude blitzing the cars. He's outrunning them, and they do a good job with the indicators, like i.e., showing what they can lift or showing how much force is given into a blow. And so you see like math and the physics, and also is an indicator to show the character's strength and speed. And throughout the journey, we find out a little bit more about these characters, and I think it gets interesting because there's actually some stuff I would have liked to have seen in the movie, but we didn't get it. But they explained it, and it captures your attention. Like so, for starters, and this is just like math going on in the background because like we use math to keep track of our daily lives, and time is something that's inherently mathematical, and the units that we use to measure that time, it's just built in that way, right? And so, that being said, one of the things that is mentioned throughout the film is that like you the law has been doing this for like pretty much like 2 years, right? He's been going on this insane crusade, and all the while we have Gabe Law getting stronger and faster and thinking quicker along the way. And so math is used to convey, um, the power that he's getting over that time. And we're given a window for how much that time was. And so it's cool to think about that. And, this information is conveyed by like his wife, TK. And what I like about that is like, one, she mentioned that, but it's like how she mentioned it. Cause I like it that like, some things are changing for him, but she indicates that she's been there on this journey and she's been seeing it, so she knows that he's not making it up, and I think that's cool. And so I would have liked to have seen like more of that journey, and I would have liked to seen more of like Yu Law's journey, as he just like kind of spirals more into madness trying to obtain his power because he was one of the NBA agents, and then bam, he pops off once he has to defend himself, and he realizes he's getting more power, and I want to see just how long it took before he was just like, I could do this, and I'm just going to take out every other version of me. And it just like it gets interesting, right? Because the way he considers it's like, oh, well, they're all me. I'm just returning that power and putting it in the one source, really, which it's math used for evil. But also speaking of math, one of the things that he says is like the shortest distance between 2 points is a line. It's a very mathematical thing to say, and he's talking about this in regards to power. And what I like about this is not only is it a mathematical reference in a traditional sense, but it lets you know so much about his character, so much about his approach, and later this comes into play during the final fight. It really comes into play all throughout the film, but we'll get to that. So not only are you having math being used, to build up the universe and also to indicate things like strength and speed and all that good stuff. But you have things like time being used, things like coordinates being used, and these are all parts of our everyday life where you don't necessarily think, oh yeah, this is math. which is unfortunate because it all is. But and to that I mean, like some of you may, right? But I feel like a lot of people, they'll still really basic things that are everyday to us now, and they might just be okay. So that's not real math, and it's like yes, it is. But my point is, math just it's all over the place in that movie in ways that you don't always expect, and I think like just using it to navigate the story as well is. Um, Indicate certain things about the characters is pretty cool. And then I'm going to get to the final fight, but I want to talk about like math in some other ways outside of it, right? So there's math and how long the movie is, right? And how we got there, right? Because one, the movie's 87 minutes, almost 90 minutes, basically an hour and a half. And the thing is, one, I like that length for a movie. Not enough movies do that, at least these days, right? And the other thing is like that there's math in that. There's math in how long it is, but like how that was determined and what led to it, right? Because you're filming sometimes like hours upon hours of footage, but you're cutting that down into something that in theory is cohesive, right? You're making edits, you're making choices, and there's math in how all that functions and how all that flows. There's math in the lighting, there's math in the sound design, there's math in the music and how it was composed and how it was used. And in the case of the one, not only did they have music that was composed specifically for this movie, but they had a number of songs that came from different artists of the time that were of the metal variety. So you had things like Drowning Pool and Disturbed and things like that. Like I mean, it starts off like one of the first things you hear in that movie is like Bodies by Drowning Pool. That's where you even heard of them in the first place. Um, and so you hear songs like that. So Disturbed, Drowning Pool, stuff like that, and like there's a few Papa Roach songs in there. Um, but my whole point is like there's math in the music and how it's composed, whether it was composed by those artists that had nothing to do initially with that film, or composed for the film specifically. And then there's math in how that music is used within the film, what it indicates about the moments, about the story, but also like what segments are they using and why. It's just math across the board, and not only is there math in everything I just said, but there's math in how the actors are voicing their characters. Like how loud, how's their breathing, where are they putting the inflections in speech, how is their timing compared to other actors. There's math in all of that, and there's math in the motions that they're doing, and in the fights there's math in the choreography. And my God, we're gonna circle back to that because when we get to it, I got things to say. There's math in all that. There's math in how much they're making. There's math in how much the movie was making. There's math in how much the movie was cost. The budget was around 50 million and it made around 80 million overall. So it did make a profit. And then the question becomes like, well, did it make enough? According to the studio, did it make more than enough? And that depends on what a studio is expecting. But either way, it's a profit, and I think that's interesting. But there's math in that and how all those things work and what they mean going forward with different projects or with different actors and directors, and so on and so forth, right? And there's just math in that whole putting everything together for a movie, and just so much involved in that. And back to the choreography in terms of the fights, I think that gets really interesting because there's math in the motions, there's math in the timing, there's math in filming all that and doing any special effects. And what I want to do is I want to focus in on the final fight. Yes, we are finally here. So with the fight, everything that I just said, sorry, with the final fight, everything that I just said applies to that as well, right? But what I really like is the fighting style and how it plays out because Yulaw is very direct. Again, one of the things that he says early on in the film to his former partner, like Rodiger, and is like when he's talking about power, is the shortest amount, the shortest distance between 2 points is a line. And he talks about this in terms to obtaining power, to seeking his goals. And this is reflected in his fighting style, right? It's this mathematical statement in that traditional sense that reflects his role, his philosophy as well as his fighting style because he's very direct, very to the point, very aggressive. And what I like about that is with Gabler, the fighting style that you're seeing him practice for a good amount of the film is not like that. His particular fighting style, it's more circular in nature rather than direct. It's more about offense and defense, not just one or the other. And it works for him. It makes sense for what we've seen about his personality. Although, it doesn't always have to be that way, but it works in the case of the film. And what I like is not only do we have these two characters with these two different fighting styles, but they themselves are mathematical in nature. Not because, okay, so not only is the motion in the nature of the fighting mathematical in nature, but the very way they're fighting. And what I like in particular is at the start of the final fight, Gabe isn't doing his normal style. He's fighting like you law and getting bodied. In fact, the first half of the fight, he's aggressive because Yulaw killed his wife, right? He's aggressive because he wants to take out this dude. And that whole first half of the fight, he gets bodied horribly because he's trying to fight in a style that is not his own. Because Yulaw's style is not that that's inferior. No, it worked for him. He's aggressive, and that made sense. But Gabe Law is trying to fight him in his way because he's feeling aggressive and it's not him and it goes horribly. But during that second half of the fight, things turn around because he starts fighting his way and he's able to defend better and counter better. He's able to think more clearly and more fluidly. And so you have these two opposing styles that very much suit their people. But what I think is Law, he did not adjust. His style worked, but he has not really had a person on his level in quite some time, right? If at all. Um, and so it's just like, well, what does he do, right? He just kept on trying the same thing and being aggressive and going right to the point. And there's more strategic ways to do it that way, right? He underestimated Gabe because there's a point when he bodied him, right, and he thought it was over, and he never quite recovered. Um, but I just think it's interesting, right? Because there's not only math in the motion in the fight, in the choreography in the fight, but there's math in just like actually how they're fighting, style to style, and there's math in how long that fight is going on and what they want to do at any given moment, right? Because this has all been thought of, it's all been choreographed. And it's just like, so they have this back and forth, but he gets bodied during the first half. And then the second half, he makes that comeback. That had to be determined. And there's math and all that. And so I think, one, it's an underrated movie to me. And I really think that fight, while cool, and I'm sure a lot of people agree, is still somehow underrated. Because one, um, it's just like it's a cool fight. There's some cool effects going on, like with the sparks on the second half, and I like those. But it's just like there's math along the way, and I think that's pretty cool, right? And of course, music playing throughout, and there's math in determining where we're gonna put in the music and where we're gonna cut it off and how it's gonna sync up with what's going on in the screen. And again, just math across the board because it's just like math in the fight, math in how long the fight is, math in the motions and the choreography and the way that they're fighting. You have this like linear style and it's more like circular style of fighting, like these different types of martial arts and what they say about the characters and how they're used to portray a story. And I think that's dope. I think that's cool. Math is amazing and it's used every day and in every way. And I think it's cool when I see things like this because I just like it's a visual way to show you what's going on, which I know sounds redundant, but just roll with it. It's like it's a visual way to explain something about the characters in the story, right? And so I did that last fight. I did the whole movie overall. To close things out, It's a fun movie. I think it was really cool. Like when it came out, I was in ninth grade, and it was like, hey, this seems really cool. And it was. I rewatched it recently, and I'm just like, yeah, this is still cool. Like it knew what it was. It was fun. It was to the point, much like you law. And to me, it did its job. It was a fun film. It was enjoyable. It didn't overstay its welcome, and I dig it. I dug it then. I dig it now. So yeah, now this is my video on math in the one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Professor Prime out.